ICPC closes case in corruption trial of NBC boss. So the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission yesterday closed its case against the Director General of the National Broadcasting Commission, Ishak Kawu. This followed the Commission's failure to produce the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed.
The Commission's failure, or the Lai Mohammed from presenting
The
himself?
Commission failed to produce, so he didn't show, but the Commission failed to produce. They're supposed to produce him as a witness, and he didn't come. All right, well, please go ahead if you're.
Well, just as you mentioned, I mean, this is a case that has started for quite some months now, and this news broke out sometime in February of this year that the Honorable Minister of Lai Mohammed did sign.
Minister of Information and Culture.
Yeah, and
Lai
Information
Mohammed.
and Culture.
Yes.
Lai Mohammed did sign a. He did approve the funding, which was then to the tune of 2.5 billion naira for a digital switchover process that was meant to have taken place, but for some reason best known to them, the money was diverted through other means, and the Independent Corrupt Practices did carry out, that's ICPC, they did carry out an investigation and found out that, I mean, the money was misappropriated, and by so doing, there was an arrest, and now they've been charged to court, and there were 3 persons that were charged to court. One of them is the Director General of the Nigerian National Broadcasting Commission, which is Ishak Kawu. The other person was also a gentleman by the name of Lucky Omoluwa, and Devoe Okorie, who's the chairman and the chief operating officer of a communications company, which is a private-owned company. And so, of course, this misappropriation of fund did take place between the National Broadcasting Commission and this private company.
The name of the company is Pinnacle Communication.
Well,
it's mentioned in this article, and we have to sometimes begin to
call out names.
Yeah, call out names. Pinnacle Communication.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a scandal that unraveled, and in the process of the investigation, it turned out that the Honorable Minister Lai Mohammed did sign this approval of this contract. So what would you expect when an investigation is being carried out? You would expect him to come and testify and to be a witness to this. Although it has been said, or he did claim, that he was deceived into approving the project. I mean, this is just inexcusable. How is this excuse tenable in a law court, that he was deceived into approving it? A whole Minister of Information, you would expect that due diligence should have been done, should have been carried out before the signing of the project. I mean, I'm sorry to say, this just reeks, and it's smack of negligence. It's also a show of double standards, I would say, because if your minister of a government that is highly regarded as fighting corruption, once this news broke out, what I would have expected is that the minister should be stepping aside for further investigation to have been carried out. He's meant to have presented himself and cleared himself appropriately, but we're not seeing that. It seems as if he's just been shielded from the whole of this investigation. He's been shielded literally from being prosecuted too, because I mean, the buck stops on his table.
Absolutely.
And it's quite shameful that Mr. Cow's name was dragged in the mud from this news. I mean, just like the many cases of media trials that we see, this is one way to highlight the need for some of these stories being published. Some of these media publications really to be silenced over time. If you don't have the weight of evidence, to present before your case, I don't think any noise should be made about it. Noise should be made after the case has been concluded, in my own opinion.
Oh yeah, of course. But when you're talking about evidence, sufficient evidence has been provided. I mean, the minister is not denying that he did sign it. He signed it.
Deceived into doing it. I mean, thank you so much, Gbolahan. Let's move on to the next story. But we had to mention the fact that this is the kind of impunity sometimes that Nigerians complain about when we talk about government officials not being held accountable.
Absolutely.
He's supposed to at least present himself to defend his his position.
And then we say we're
in
fighting
this-
corruption.
Exactly.
Double standard.
All right, let's move on to the next story. Unfortunately, it's also about some kind of corruption malpractices. Devoe WAEC withdraws 1992-1993 candidate certificates. So the West African Examinations Council has released the list of impounded certificates of candidates who were believed to have engaged in malpractices during its examinations held as far back as December 1992 and 1993.
Reminds me a lot. The 27 years ago, and WAEC did say that they were being called out on account of impersonation. That's a big word. Impersonation is what we refer to as mercenaries. When you have people who, maybe older candidates or those who have knowledge or have passed out, come in and sit for you the exam. And it's an old rigging method that many have employed to pass their exams. Now, this was published in the JAM bulletin. I think there were about 10 candidates that they stated their names. And JAM was saying that to prevent this, that they would be employing the use of the national ID, that's working with NIMMC for the next exams. So currently, the JAM registrar, Professor Ishaq Oloyede, said that they will be carrying out trials with staff as well as some of the small exams that they take to ensure that they can firm up on this new approach. I don't know, statutes of limitations, does it apply to exams? Some of the people who took exams 27 years ago, that's even if their university education was 7 years, they're 20 years into their careers.
I was going to ask,
yes.
Because at the end of the day, you can withdraw certificates and so on. What is the implication, or what are the implications of this action?
Well,
so can someone be fired from his job if it's that his certificate was gotten wrongly?
Well, if it's left for your employer to take that action. But if there's any, I don't know whether WAEC intends to prosecute them or just to call them out. Two, if there's anybody that you're trying to get employed with that requires such credentials, and they do their search on it and they realize that one of your credentials is fake or has been deemed as unqualified, then it might become an issue for you. However, I think the real issue here is our penchant for cheating in this country. In my secondary school days, cheating went as far as, what we used to call microchips. You write small things on papers, you take them into an exam hall. Now it has evolved and even become technological, whereby upfront people are receiving question papers and answers on this. So I do hope that JAM is able to money now that we know they can buy enough BVN. When I say BVN, that's biometric equipment to be in all centers, to be able to thumbprint and identify some of these candidates up front. It's one of the methods. It's not all inconclusive, but it will address this impersonation. We have to deal with this desire to cheat in this country. At some currently, if you ask those who are in school, cheating is not seen as a crime. It's seen as a means to an end. And it's just unfortunate and sad that we're at that state. Even, it's not just the students, parents, wards, guardians, people encourage their wards to cheat to get ahead. And it starts at the very bottom. You wonder why we have politicians, even, it's not just the students, parents, wards, guardians, people encourage their wards to cheat to get ahead. And it starts at the very bottom. You wonder why we have politicians who live daily on morning breakfast and lunch on corruption. It starts from when they're children.
Thank you very much for that point. So if you're there tweeting or sending us messages about how corrupt the leaders are, and you obtained your certificate by corrupt means, you are corrupt yourself. Let's start with ourselves, because it's easy to point fingers at the top when you yourself are not doing your part, not to be corrupt. Thank you so much for that.
Martinez on WhatsApp says, once again, I would say this again, the ICPC is actually doing their work, unlike AFCC that has allowed itself to be used as a political tool for witch hunts for position. Thank you, Bola.
But they're doing their work, but no results, because they've prosecuted. Don't have it. That's the same thing that happens with the EFCC. We hear big stories around. We've investigated this person, yet we don't see convictions as we would want to. But we keep hope alive. All right, let's move on to our next story. Guardian newspaper has this one. Gbolahan. Residents flee town of Kanu's lawyer after policeman's death. So a siege, allegedly, this happened in Orai Fite in Ekwisigo local government of Anambra State. And the siege was said to be done by a combined team of soldiers and policemen who have forced residents to flee the community yesterday. Now, I don't know what the link is, why they've mentioned the IPOB leader, Nnamdi Kanu, or his lawyer in this particular case. But please, can you detail what's going on in Anambra State?
I mean, there are two accounts of this incident, but one, the first account, which was given by the Commissioner of Police, John Abank, who reported or gave a press briefing and said that there was an initial complaint, a formal complaint against the barrister, that's Ifeanyi Ejiofor, who is Kanu's lawyer,
Yeah.
and it was reported that there were incidences occurring in his household that were related to alleged case of abduction, assault, and harm and malicious damage of properties. So in the process of the police responding to this security alert, unfortunately, they were met with heavy resistance in the house, and this led to violence happening, and then there were IPOB members attacked the police officers, which led to the death of the two police officers. That was one of the accounts that was initially given.
Okay.
But there was a separate account which stated that the policemen did die in the cause of a clash between two different factions of a masquerade group. They were probably carrying out some cultural traditional event in that community, and there was a clash between those two different factions, which led to the death of the two police officers. That were the two accounts that was given. So right now, at the moment, the lawyer is now being called in for questioning. He's being the police is asking for his arrest, and he's meant to be reporting to the police station, but he's not being found at the moment now. But I mean, one of the accounts, just as the police officers mentioned, it was also reported in this article that the police officers, when they went and they stormed into this property, they did actually attack some residents of that property, and that was what led into this assault and the retaliation by the IPOB members.
Yeah, but I think it's important for me to mention here that the article does state that IPOB has denied any involvement in the attack.
Absolutely.
And the killing of the policemen.
Absolutely. So now the confusion is now which of these accounts are we to take as the true reflection of what has really happened. I mean, many a times you find out that when situations of this nature happens in Nigeria, you always get conflicting accounts, and it begs for a lot of investigation to be done. And when we're talking about this investigation, many a times when police officers are involved or citizens are involved, I would expect that you should have an independent committee look into the death of the victims, and it shouldn't actually be the police officers that should be carrying out this investigation.
It should, because it's the
no, not necessarily.
If there's any issue of crime or in this case, especially, it should be the police.
But if it involves a police officer killing somebody, should it be the police officers? Absolutely.
The police force will investigate.
Absolutely. So there should be investigation not only by the police officers, but there should be higher authorities that are independent, so that we can get.
Not necessarily, because you have the Commissioner of Police.
What about the Police Service Commission?
No. Let's not be distracted by committees, numerous committees that have been set up over time. We know that the primary role of the police is to secure the lives and property of citizens in a particular region, right?
Yes.
So this is their job. If members of the police were killed, which is like the primary focus of the story, for instance, if their lives were lost, it calls for a wide-scale investigation and apprehension. Arrests should be made immediately before. So subsequent to this investigation or to these arrests, the investigations to be carried out, and then the culprits will be identified.
But I think it's important to mention that the Ohanese president, Chief Nia Nwondo, has actually called for a judicial inquiry into the case of attack. So they're asking for an inquiry into that. They've also asked for the checkpoints in the east to be checked, particularly at this time of the year where a number of people will be traveling home. So there is that contention and people asking that we need to actually investigate this, that there are cases of reported abuse of power and not, be going beyond their jurisdiction.
But he also talks about how the police also handles situations of this nature. How do they go about handling it? Must we always have, anytime a police officer is involved, we have people dying at the end of the day? There has to be other ways of handling these situations.
It's very sad, but it's also worthy of note that when some of these things happen, it's easy for people to peddle rumors.
Oh yeah, of course.
Based on, due to the sensitivity of even the people involved, the region where this happened,
absolutely,
and everything else involved. Obas said, okay, you've sent this message earlier. Fred comes back to say from Ikoito saying, thank you very much for your message. Said, because WAEC, okay, organization does not confirm employees if their credentials or certificates aren't genuine. So who confirmed the WAEC certificates of these ones of 27 years ago? Please, I do not understand.
So Tosin, what happened is that they had the certificates. However, their certificates are being revoked because investigations revealed that they were obtained through, corrupt means.
Impersonation.
Yes, impersonation.
Ace from Magol says, please, what's the meaning of heavy resistance by IPO members who are not reported to have weapons? In any case, we've had these stories before with other groups like Shiites who also had no weapons. So how did they attack?
Again, IPOB members have denied being involved in this. So we need to also be, until we get an official position or statement, it's just, different sides.
Yes, please. Olu from Malacca says, good morning. WAEC should clarify whether the results have been cancelled earlier or just being cancelled. If the latter is the case, then it's worrying because if there's an error in the compilation of names, this can damage the life of an innocent person. How does WAEC come by the facts or these facts 27 years later? If a person is going to challenge the cancellation, how can you get evidence 27 years later?
All right, thank you very much for your comments. Our next story here, Devoe, Coronation, revocation, 21 Obas return to trenches. This is from the New Telegraph. Take us through the story.
Well, we can retitle this Alibaba and the 41, in this case, it's Ajimobi and the 21 Obas. So it's a long read, but let's just summarize in a few sentences. We all knew Ajimobi, the former governor of Oyo State, aka constituted authority. Well, he, in a bid, as some would say, to water down the position of the Olu of Ibadan, he made moves to inaugurate 21 other Obas, that's about 21 high chiefs and bales that would have a faster pace to the crown. Many kicked against it, but on a certain Sunday where the courts could not stop him, he inaugurated these Obas to avoid restraint. Well, eventually, yes, some of the other governors did take to the courts to try and resist it, okay? However, the current government, that's the Sheyi-led government, who is in PDP.
That's Governor Sheyi Makinde.
Yes, has decided to take a move on the matter because it had brought a lot of rancor within the monarchy all this while. And what he has done was that he stepped down the case from the appeal court. I'm not sure whether it's the high or the magistrate that he took it to, so that the Obas could the matter could be reviewed again and looked at as a form of out-of-court settlement. However, the 21 Obas have refused. They're not in agreement with the move. They believe that it's also a bid to water them down or to even remove their titles from them. Now, that's, the meat of the story. They're still in court and we await the outcome. However, what is of high import is it's sad that highly revered and respected seats of tradition and power in terms of our traditional monarchies have been watered down and in some cases completely decimated in the name of politics. Yes, the Constitution did give state governments the power to, it initially started from endorsement of these thrones, but now it's almost become they serve at the pleasure of their governments in power. And we've seen this in many cases, especially the well-publicized one of the Kaduna State, Kanu, the emir, and for emirs that were appointed. Now, it's unfortunate because we need to protect these institutions. Two, and I think there's a lot of history involved here that needs to be set right. It was never about going to court. It was never about the governors in power. Even in the military days when I think Abacha and co removed some sultans that were in power. It was never about that. And when you do this, you not only change the course of history, but you change the implementation and why they are there. I think we need to protect them. And I think civil society institutions need to rise to this challenge and see how they can protect these institutions from these politicalizations. They're ours to keep. And if we allow politicians who really do not care beyond their own interests to mess them up, at the end of the day, it's our own heritage that we are destroying.
All right. Thank you, Devoe.
Thank you very much, Devoe. Let me come to you, Gbolahan, for your analysis on this story from the Daily Times. The Department of State Services said yesterday that it has uncovered syndicated plots by some undesirable groups to cause a breakdown of law and order in various parts of the country, including Abuja. According to the statement from the Public Relations Officer, Dr. Peter Afunaya, and in this report from the Daily Times, he said the plot is to instigate protests, mass action, violence, with a view to causing anarchy and destabilizing the country, especially during the Yuletide season. Your thoughts on this, Gbolahan?
Well, we first of all, I'd like to thank the DSS for trying to maintain law and order
You want to thank
in the country. I mean, it's important. Law and order is important in our country, and peace is also important. However, in this report and the news coverage, the report that was been given by the Public Relations Officer, I would highlight instigating protest and mass action. Since when did protesting become an illegal activity in Nigeria?
A crime.
Since when did it become a crime? To my knowledge, this is one of the tenets of democracy. You must be able to disagree in a civil manner. And the right to congregation is one of those rights, one of the fundamental rights when we're talking about democracy.
In the Constitution.
So, in the Constitution. You're talking about this is anti-democratic. I would like to think trying to prevent a mass protest is undemocratic.
But it's not on its own. So they discovered plots, according to them, to instigate protests,
It's
mass action,
yes,
and violence. So all together.
When you know, this is one of the problems that we always have in Nigeria. When government is trying to prevent certain things, it's usually couched under insecurity, violence, and mass action. And I mean, the border closure. We were having a discussion about it yesterday. The president did actually say that it was couched under as insecurity. But
don't forget, it wasn't. It's not just Sene border that was closed. If we are going to
the Niger border was also closed. Yes,
there are like about 4 or 5 borders.
There's several items that are being smuggled in and out of the country, but that's one of it. So when you get security agencies coming to you to say that they've uncovered a mass action and a protest going on which will lead to violence.
No, it's not going on plans.
Or that is planned. What I would actually have expected the DSS to have done is come up with sufficient evidence. Then
how do you know they don't have evidence?
If they do have the evidence, then what I would expect is that if you're really certain about it, then go after the perpetrators of these and prosecute them in the law court if you do have sufficient evidence, just as you've said. I mean,
but matters, I mean,
yes,
it's rejecting because and we need to highlight some very important aspects of the story. Department of State Services, they're not like the police in the sense that they're a higher body in the scheme of things, and they're
not a higher body. They have an intelligence role.
They have an intelligence role to uncover secret or covert operations that may be going on that you and I are not aware of. So for them to come up to say, oh, they've uncovered plots in some quarters for these things to happen in the Yuletide season, isn't letting us know that, oh, these guys were actually watching what's going on that you guys are not aware of. And we're not entitled to getting the minute details of these things.
Who's not entitled to? The citizens.
Yeah, of course, because there's some things that you don't have the capacity to handle.
Fair enough, Valentine. If you put it that way, then what is stopping them from taking it a step further? Rather than doing this trial by media and releasing this press statement and saying, we know what you're doing. If somebody wants to perpetrate an offense, I mean, we've seen situations in other crimes where terrorists are arrested before they commit the offense. Once the investigative units have gotten substantial evidence to back their claims.
Yes.
In this case, they haven't done that. All they're doing is a press release.
Yes, but
and as far as I'm concerned, this is an attempt to stifle people from protesting.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the comments that they've also made is that they've spoken to parents to inform their ward. So which means that they're directing this towards student protests.
DSS should call the names, okay? So let's know what we're dealing with.
Okay.
There should be no attempt to connect civil protests to violence and unrest. They're two separate issues. And there's been that covert attempt for anyone who wants to protest to be seen as trying to incite or destabilize.
Absolutely.
We should resist it completely.
I agree with your opinions, but that again is assuming that protest is a singularity in the scheme of this, in the face of this announcement or pronouncement, saying they actually identify protest, mass action, violence altogether in this report, and also stating that it's not unique to Nigeria. And this is me just playing devil's advocate.
To prevent people from protesting?
No. This is not unique to Nigeria in the sense of making such announcement to say that they've uncovered certain plans. Even in the US, you find certain reports like that.
But they go after the perpetrators once they have substantial evidence.
Will they tell you their step-to-step, action, and until they have results?
Okay, let's wait and see whether they will go take it a step further there.
Exactly. Let's move on now to this day newspaper next. Federal government to transform grazing reserves to ranches in 7 states. They've identified through the implementation of the National Livestock Transformation Plan in 7 states, identified Zaria, Kaduna at the opening. This was made in Kaduna State, the announcement. Yes. Identified Adamawa, Taraba, Plateau, Nasarawa, Benue, Kaduna, and Zamfara states as the frontline states where they'll start.
It's an excellent story, and I would ask everyone to take their time and read it. Unfortunately, the federal government, in its penchant for doing things many days after, now they're releasing the facts on the National Livestock Transformation Plan, which is headed by the VP. Remember, this is not about open grazing, which was touted by the Meteala at some points. This is the plan that the federal government actually had to implement to curb. Now, the executive secretary, that's Professor Bashir Usman, that's the National Commission of the Nomadic Education, was speaking at a 3-day workshop, and he said that 7 states, their grazing reserves will be converted to ranches. Okay, there are about 416 grazing reserves spread across 6 geopolitical zones. About 141 of them have been gazetted, and gazetted is usually the channel which the federal government documents actions that it intends to take and that have been implemented, and funding will be appropriated to it. Right now, these states cover the north and the middle belt. All right, and the intent is aimed at, yes, ending the herder-farmer conflict, which he even mentioned had remained unabated and resurfaced in some areas. That's some truth which we haven't really spoken about. So the cases are still going. Now, when they do this, what the intention is to transform, to build some infrastructure within these grazing reserves, to include security, to include markets, clinics, educational centers, roads, processing centers, etc. And one of the most important issues that he raises, this paradigm shift, okay, from the nomadic open grazing ways that we have known, has created the shift to using of ranches, has created a dearth or a gap in skills, okay, because now to implement this for these former nomads to actually take on this new system, they've got to learn, and that's why some of those educational systems, I know it's coming late in the day. Many people have died or have been hurt or lost loved ones or properties in this whole attack. However, the quicker they do this, the better for us. It's not just for cattle, it's for all livestock that require processing and sales towards the market. I hope they didn't put a timeline to it, but I hope this can be done within the next 1 year. It will be a very big legacy if Buhari is able to deliver this.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Gbolahan.
We have comments on Twitter before we go. Mr. Funchi says an independent inquiry consists of community leaders, government officials, and security personnel usually look into this case involving these cases.
And that's talking about the Guardian story on the policeman's death.
Yes, and final one from BS Picture on Twitter. DSS coming out to say there's a plot for a group to protest and cause violence is a way of preventing the ongoing plan for Occupy Nigeria. It's a clear indication this government doesn't want criticism. A big thanks to all our commenters as well as our analysts in the studio. Thank you, Mr. G Quest, Gbolahan, and of course Devoe Okorie at Devoe Okorie on Twitter. We're still here. It's a Wednesday, so the locker room 981 will be coming up in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. Good morning.
Hey, Wes.
Nice banter.
Yes.
You go holiday.
How are you doing?